topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Most leaders are sitting on untapped human energy, and I help them unlock it. I'm an organizational psychologist, logotherapist, workforce advisor, and the founder of the Gusto Now movement. But the title I live by is much simpler. I traffic in energy. Not the surface level kind of motivation or another engagement initiative, but the deeper force, what I call gusto, the life force for performance that drives commitment, perseverance, and genuine ownership of a shared mission in the clients we serve. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or visit my personal site, elisecortez.com, for information on my speaking and my books. With us today is Warren Kornblum, the former Global Chief Marketing Officer of Toys R Us, as well as other leading international brands, and the author of Notes from the Brand Stand, Thoughts on Emotional Branding from Someone Who Has Fought for Customer Attention and Won. He now advises leaders and brands on how to build trust and emotional connection, as well as on what he calls share of heart. We'll be talking about several of the ideas he puts forth in his book on creating an emotional brand that unites you with your customer. He joins us today from Palm Beach, Florida, where it is storming. Warren, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and hopefully Mother Nature will cooperate.
Yeah, I wanted to say that just in case you go off for a bit. So here is this beautiful book you put into the world. I always like to celebrate this, Warren, because especially you being a man, I like to say that what you did in putting forth this book is actually harder than it is to bring a new life into the world, and I've done both, so I can tell you it's true. Congratulations. So let's open, if we can, since our listeners and viewers aren't as acquainted with you as I am. If you would just sketch your background briefly and how it was that you chose to work in branding. Why this? Why not accounting, for gosh sakes?
Well, probably my math wasn't good enough for the accounting side, but no, I was born in Toronto, and I'm Canadian. Been in the United States now for about 30 years. And to be honest, I think that it was a calling for me. I just have always been fascinated by business, by brands, by people's reaction to them. I started out in the advertising business, spent the first part of my career running my own I didn't start my own agency, but started in advertising as a copywriter, actually, then went to business school, and then went into the advertising world. At some point in the late 90s, my agency was bought, and I was moved to New York as part of that in an earn-out, as often happens to people when they sell their company, have to go to work for the acquirers. And as an entrepreneurial advertising agency person who was very much into the nitty-gritty of working with clients and things like that, I was not as comfortable sitting in a corner office being more of an executive. I wanted to get into the trenches and work with clients, work with the creative teams. When the 3 years was up, quickly I decided that it wasn't for me to be in that environment, and I was recruited, as you mentioned in my introduction, to be the first global chief marketing officer of Toys R Us, which in those days was dealing with Amazon coming on strong, Walmart getting into the toy category, internet really coming on strong, and they decided that they needed someone else to take a look at their marketing strategy. So I did that, and I was there until when it was a public company, until it sold to private equity in 2006. And since then, I've been advising clients. But brands have just always been something that fascinated me, that I think I was good at. And I think most of all, I enjoy the relationships, both with clients as well as with customers. So that's how I got there.
Mm. Well, as we were talking before we got on air, I have fond memories of Toys R Us. Of course, shopping, mostly for my daughter to get toys. And I think, back to your concept of the emotional connection. I think part of the reason I loved Toys R Us, and maybe others do as well, is it when you walk into the store, it was like okay to be a kid again yourself
Yeah.
suddenly.
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing, I still get it. I left in 2006, so it's been 20 years, and people still automatically, when they know of my background and my time there, want to talk about those days, want to talk about their memories of Toys R Us. And frankly, in terms of emotional connection, when I'm talking to them, and I'm sure this is what you go through too, you almost think about it in human terms. It's almost like it was a friend,
Mhm.
and it was about the magic of being a child. And one of the first things I did when I got there, because I was a Toys R Us kid too, and one of the first things I did when I got there is I said, we have to give people an ability to kind of celebrate emotionally the brand that they love. There were flaws. The stores were not perfect. There were lots of issues. Our internet wasn't that great. But at the end of the day, what we did and how long the company had been doing it was where the magic was. And, one of the first things I did was two simple things. They weren't rocket science. They just made perfect sense to me. One is, for whatever reason, they had stopped using, which you will remember, the famous song that people mostly can still sing today. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid.
Yeah, I do.
Generational thing, but for whatever reason they had stopped using it for a while, so brought that back. And then the other thing was Jeffrey the Giraffe, who was
Yes.
from the day Charles Lazarus founded the company, probably over almost 100 years ago now. It was a two-dimensional giraffe, but I said, Jeffrey's kind of like grandparents said growing up on him, were the first generation, parents were the next generation, and the kids today. So we brought him back in a contemporary way, but I thought it was really important that those links to the heart of Toys R Us, which I think in truth was almost better than the reality of it, but that was what the connection was with people, and I think it's endured time. So yeah, they were great years. I really enjoy those, but it is surprising to me how often people, I mean, my advertising career, my consulting career, my speaking career, everybody inevitably, the first question is Toys R Us. And I love that. It's a big part of my life too.
Mm-hmm. Such a wonderful thing to get to experience. One of the reasons I'm an organizational psychologist and not, say, a clinical psychologist is because I believe in the wonder and the power and the dignity and the nobility of work to be an important part of our lives. And
Great.
I want it to be better for people. For a lot of people, it isn't. And I'm out. That's part of our mission, is to help make this a better experience for them. So before we go on, Oren, I think it would be important for our listeners and viewers and be of service to them if you gave us your idea of what is a brand. What do we mean by brand?
Well, I think that, stores have names, or brands, soaps have names and cars have names. But at the end of the day, a brand, I think, elevates beyond just name and service and commodity. It becomes kind of it's almost overused, but it becomes kind of the DNA or the personality of the business. It's when you get it right, the brand is everything that the experience, the actual transactional side of the business, the hiring of the business. I mean, I always say to everybody that I talk to, the brand isn't owned by the CEO or the shareholders or the founders. It is, but the best brands are owned by everybody, top to bottom and bottom to top in an organization. And most importantly, when you get it right, they're owned by the people who shop or do business with that company. It's almost like human personality and business brand are analogous in many ways in my mind. It's kind of what that entity stands for. Obviously, some businesses don't have brands because all they are is they are commodity providers and transaction based. But when you really start to build internal loyalty, culture, which I know is true to near and dear to your heart, that's what a brand is. A brand is everything that kind of surrounds the essence of a business.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay, so let's compare and contrast here. You do this beautifully in the 27, I think it is, chapters of your book, but I really appreciate that you compare and contrast. And so if we talk about some of the brands that have gone away, so, Kodak, Sharper Image, Radio Shack, Blockbuster, and many others are examples. They were once dominant companies that failed, you say, because their brandstands didn't adapt to changing times and because they lost touch with their audiences. If you could say a little bit more about that, and then I want to contrast the ones that have kind of stuck around.
Sure. I think that two things happen. One is that I think brands get in their own way, which is part of some of those examples you used. And then I think also circumstances in the market change and they don't know how to get out of that way.
Yes.
In the case, for example, of Kodak, which is probably a classic one, a lot of people don't realize that Kodak was the first adopter of digital technology.
Right.
And the higher ups in the organization somewhere decided, whoa, we can't do that because if we do that, we're not going to sell film. Well, that decision meant that you weren't only not going to sell film, you were probably position yourself almost right out of business because people, the consumer, the customer in my mind is the most important thing in any equation of business and branding. And customers were evolving and customers were looking to, digital cameras in those days. And then quickly that transition through Steve Jobs in the main turned to the phone. And Kodak just failed to move with the times. They didn't fail to recognize it because they invented or were on the cusp of invention of the digital camera. They just decided that they were, it's almost like the too big to fail. Their business was not going to be challenged by technology. Well, 20 years later, more than that now, as you go through those conversations, technology is going to change businesses. It's changing them every day and continues to. I think in terms of Sharper Image is probably the second example that I gave where they just lost relevance. They were the place that used to go for new innovation, and there weren't the other options that you could do as fast and as easily through online, through search on your phones. And I think Sharper Image just didn't move with the times and didn't realize that their customer wanted a different way to shop. It wasn't so much that they didn't have unique products. I think they did. It was a matter that they weren't doing it in a way that the consumer in those days wanted, and other options appeared, and they didn't keep their edge on the innovation cycle.
Interesting that they didn't keep their sharper image.
Exactly.
And we'll talk about this later, but that really speaks to the need to constantly listen to your customers and hear and understand them, their needs, where they're going, et cetera, which you're describing as is really lacking there.
As you know, and thank you for having spent some time with the book, but that's one of the things that I almost felt when I was writing it, I almost felt I said too many times, but I don't think I can say them enough times, which is listening is the most important side of communicating. It truly is. And if, one-on-one is one thing, but even when you're talking to millions, you need to understand what they're saying and listen to them because it's about them. You have no God-given right to do business. Right.
Well, so here we are. We've started off by talking about some of these well-known brands that failed. I want to be able to situate because this gets to your world. Those that they might be small but resourceful teams with even fewer resources, but somehow they manage to achieve extraordinary success because they understand one thing, as you say, brands live and die in the human heart.
Yes. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's when you talk about people who are loyal to a brand, back to the Toys R Us story, it's almost like they're talking about a friend. It's almost like they've lost, when they go away, it's like they've lost somebody. When they disappoint you, it's almost as if a friend disappointed you. And why is that? It's because they're not living on their Visa or MasterCard or Amex card. They're living with the brand in their heart, and they have expectations of the brand, which is why they have loyalty to it.
Mm-hmm. So, I think it was, for me, as I said to you, Warren, that your book really helped reinforce some of the work that we do in culture transformation and culture development around purpose, especially. And I wanted to situate, you said over time, there were three things became very evident for you in your career. You say, one, marketing is about selling, while branding concentrates on building connections. I think that was really powerful. Two, the best brands prioritize building trust instead of just grabbing attention. Also powerful. And then finally, ultimately, you say you can't build a lasting brand unless it resonates with people and evolves with them. I thought that was so critical. And the Kodak thing, or not Kodak, the Sharper Image thing was just a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and I think all three are true. And if there's a through line to them, it really is. It's about the customer. It's not about us, right? I mean, as the brand people or the people running businesses, obviously it's, we're an important part of it, but if you lose touch with or lose sight of or stop fulfilling the expectations and aspirations of your customer, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it probably is a train. So
coming to get you.
News, yeah, I mean, the good news, I think, is I tend to humanize a lot of this, and whenever I think about a customer, I always almost put it into human terms, realizing, of course, they're not one person, but there's like modeling that goes on, and understanding why they want to be loyal to you, why they want to, what they want from your category, I think is key to providing it. And then it's not about lip service. You can't just say it and then it is. I think that you have to live it. You have to make sure the entire organization and every touch point that people have with you is consistent, is clear, and that they all value the customer. Because if you don't, they have lots of options and lots of alternatives, and they're not going to be loyal to you, and you're not going to touch their heart.
Right. Well, and on that note, let's grab our first break and let our listeners and viewers reflect on some of the things we've talked about so far. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Warren Kornblum. He's the former Global Chief Marketing Officer of Toys R Us, as well as other leading international brands. He now advises leaders and brands on how to build trust and emotional connections, as well as on what he calls share of heart, which is what we've been largely talking about here. In the beginning here, we've been talking about just the foundations of what makes for branding, why is it important, and how do we know it's working. After the break, we're going to start getting into that a brand needs a stand, and that comes from the idea of conviction, and we'll showcase Nike's Just Do It to start that process. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I am dedicated to helping create a world where organizations thrive because their people thrive, and we're led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of my latest came out. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand today's very discerning workforce. What do they want to need from you to give their best and want to stick around? And then I provide you 22 best practices to equip you to provide that for them through your leadership and your culture. You can find my books on Amazon or my personal site, elisecortez.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Warren Kornblum. He's the author of Notes from the Brand Stand, Thoughts on Emotional Branding from Someone Who Has Fought for Customer Attention and Won. So it's really, kind of hard not to have a conversation about really great branding and not talk about Nike. But I have gotten the chance to do some work with Nike, which is it's an amazing organization. Talk about a brand that just really, really lives. I mean, it really is exceptional, performance oriented, but also celebrates, everyone's an athlete kind of thing. But in one of your chapters, you talk about how every brand needs a stand and how that comes from conviction.
Yes, I think Nike is a good example. There are thankfully lots of them, but Nike certainly is one that pretty much everybody is aware of and has been touched by and has had them on their feet or on their bodies. And I think it goes back to the days when Phil Knight and his team early on realized that to go from just being a shoe provider to athletes that what they really needed to do is find a way to get the everyday person, be they recreational, be they walkers, be they joggers, or be they athletes, to embrace Nike as a way of life and a part of their lives, in addition to just being a shoe provider. When you think about it, some of the things that they did could easily have pigeonholed them into, they're only good for me if I'm really good at that sport. If I'm, if I can jump like Michael Jordan, or I can, on and on and on. And the brilliance of that famous campaign, Just Do It, was saying to people, you can do it too. I mean, it's about a lifestyle. It's about being inclusive. It's about sharing in what we do and how we do it and how we live. And, I think I often say that the three cornerstones everybody always talks about, which are true about well-being, are obviously fitness, diet, and sleep. And I actually was in two of those businesses, because sleep as well. But when you think about it in the context of Nike and fitness and wellness, they were saying to everyday people, we can get you there. And it's not about buying the shoe, it's about embracing the lifestyle. And our brand and everything we stand for can help you get there, because it's about you, the consumer, not so much about us sitting in a boardroom and trying to convince you to do something you're not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that. To me, that's, it speaks to the idea of aspiration you mentioned before. What are your customers aspiring for? Why I'm aspiring to be an athlete too, right? And I appreciate in that same chapter, you also talk about, Sephora. You also talk about Liquid Death, which I didn't really know what that was all about. I see there are vans all over the place. But what you also said that was so interesting is you said these brands aren't just selling products, they're selling belief systems.
Which I think is absolutely true. I mean, if Nike was all about shoes, or energy drinks were all just about, drinking a drink and whatever happens, or Sephora was just about, being a supermodel, well, that's exclusive. That's not inclusive.
Right.
And where these brands, I think, have been successful is they found a way to do a giant hug to a huge consumer group that says you belong here.
Yeah.
Sephora did it by not being polarizing to a stereotype of women who could shop in their stores. They were about everybody. They were about different looks, different races, different, affordability was always kind of a platform for them. And I think same thing with Nike. I mean, Nike, it's a group hug for everybody in the world who wants to have comfort and get out there and do things. And also, be kind of stylish about it too. I mean, if they were ugly, I don't know that it would work. Although, as you probably know, one of the companies I talk about a little bit in the book that's probably for a later conversation is Crocs. I mean, those things were ugly when they first came.
Yeah.
They found a way to go from ugly to cool.
Yeah.
Why? Because they gave their consumers, it's probably a very simplistic way to put it, but that big hug to your consumer and to your organization that's bringing you to the consumer is really important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I really like how you say that, that extending that big hug. And don't we all need a hug, for God's sakes, Okay, so we would be remiss completely, Warren, if we didn't talk about the chapter you have, which is entitled Purpose is Essential. And it's all the idea of purpose drives relevance. And I really aligned with this because it's very much the work that we do around culture and leadership. Is you say that purpose is a system, not a statement. And so you say, a true brand purpose isn't something you invent in a workshop. It's not a headline, a presentation, or a marketing asset. It's the core focus of your business, the reason why decisions are made the way they are. It's how you hire, how you prioritize, what fuels innovation, shapes culture, and it enhances customer experience. It's embedded, not announced. That's the very work that we do too. Again, I saw so many of those strong parallels between branding purpose and, culture purpose that we work with.
Well, and I think I'm glad to hear that, because I think it's essential. And I think business leaders, brand people, and anybody who's just fascinated by brands need to understand that that's a huge difference, that it's not just about what you say, particularly in the world we live in today. I mean, anybody can go out and buy awareness. I mean, things used to cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in terms of marketing budgets so you could get messages out there. it's not like that anymore. Everybody has instant access to information, instant access to both good news and bad news from a business perspective, as well as just life in general. And I think that organizations who just say, well, wouldn't it be cool if we took a stand on this and we're just going to tell people about it? Well, today's consumers it's so easy to check things out. It's so easy to do that litmus test of, is this truth or is this marketing, which is where the marketing selling versus brand being the essence of a business. I think when you talk about purpose, it's that you can, to say, oh, we're charitable and we're going to write a check for $100,000 to some company. Who cares? I think the consumer sees through that. When you are a company that lives it, eats it, breathes it, top to bottom and bottom to top, everybody in the organization is that way, and your customers embrace it and share the purpose of the business, then I think you transcend it just being a commodity. Again, I think that far too much lip service is given to purpose and not anywhere near enough just commitment and action.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And in our work, Warren, we really help organizations to help the whole team get aligned via their head, their understanding of the purpose, their heart. How is it connected to their own sense of purpose in life and their values? How does it extend that? And then their hands, what do they actually do? How do they make the decisions? How you talk about, 4 seasons, empowering the team to be able to make decisions, on the spot, to be able to take care of customers because they know what the purpose of the organization is and they're empowered to do that. And that's how we do that. So that, because the thing that I really get disgusted with is, as you say, purpose has become just, it's all over the place, but yet it means nothing. So when you hear things like pancakes on purpose or tires on purpose, you just want to throw up,
Well, and I think your work is so important in that, because you can see it when I go into a company as an advisor, and I tend to be, as much as I like to permeate the entire organization, I'm one person, so sometimes it's hard to.
Right.
But when you're in like the C-suite and you're talking to people, you could just see that when people really have a strong sense of purpose, both as individuals as well as in business, it's just, you're kind of walking on air. You're just happy to go into work. You understand what your purpose is,
Right.
and how the organization has relevance to the people that they're trying to talk to. And if that's not embraced, which is where I think your work probably comes in spades, if it's not embraced, then it just is so see-through that it's ridiculous and it doesn't work. It almost is a detriment if you
Right.
talk about being an organization with purpose and you don't live it.
Oh no, it's a terrible detriment. I've had many conversations with people who are a part of those organizations. It's actually something that's going to shorten your life on some level. It's that detrimental. But that's the energy piece that we're talking about. When we can connect that, now we've lifted the energy, which allows you to do so much more.
Exactly.
So that's why we say we traffic in energy. But
Yeah.
so we talked about purpose. Now, of course, I can't let you go without talking about meaning, because those are our 2, pillars, really, purpose and meaning. And so you go on to say that you say build meaning, not just attention. Meaning fosters loyalty. So let's talk about what you mean by that.
Well, I think that, as I said earlier, anybody can sort of grab attention, but I think grabbing meaning, a connection, a piece of someone's heart, I guess, yes, as opposed to just their wallets is so important. And you do that by having relevance to people, by having meaning to people, by standing for something, by transcending just the purchase, by doing what you say and saying what you do, but not saying what you do and then not doing it, right? And I think that nobody has a kind of God-given right to exist. There are so many options out there that consumers of all different categories can sense when a company has meaning. And very importantly, I don't think a brand or a company can have meaning unless it's also something that's embraced internally. One of the quick exercises I always do that is as intellectual as you are and learned, you may think is silly, but I always walk in, and one of the first things I do, inevitably in every waiting room I've ever gone into, there's the mission statement somewhere. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll look at it and I'll read it, and then I start talking to people in the organization about it. And you can see, I mean, you get one of 3 basic reactions. One is you get a blank stare, which is scary.
Right.
Two is you get, which I think is almost equally scary, you get the exact reciting of what those points are in the statement with no personal input.
Right.
Or three, you get that wonderful occasion where people are energized and sort of say it in their own words, but they know what the meaning of the business is and they know what the purpose of the business is. That's where you have to get to, in my mind.
I completely, we do something very similar, Warren. Yes, absolutely. And it's always fascinating to us. Okay, so I really love too this, especially here we are on the age of AI and automation everywhere. You have a chapter about, human brands win, connection is the advantage. And this is where you're really talking about how, technology is great for being able to solve those routine problems and automate wait times and, but technology can't feel. And so when the stakes are high emotionally, when a customer is frustrated, anxious, or hurt, what they need most isn't efficiency, it's connection. And that's when you want the human to be involved. And that's definitely part of what we're doing too, is doubling down on humanity in the age of technology. So I thought that was an important distinction, especially when building a brand, that you're inserting the human piece here, especially when it's really important.
100%, and I think it's at both ends of the spectrum, right? I think it's first as everybody is racing, and everybody is.
I know, yeah,
racing to get AI and the budgets and the this and the that and who's it going to replace and what's it going to do. But if there's not some human component to what is AI enabling us for, what are we trying to get out of it? And where does it impact the people we're trying to speak with? Then I think you lose something. So I think it's two sides. One is to me, AI is a huge enabler. I mean, I remember when I was running brands, if I wanted to get a kind of a sense of where our customers were. So what did you do? You hired a research company, you did focus groups, you then usage and attitude surveys, whatever. And then you waited 3 months for the results to come back. You don't have to wait 3 minutes anymore. Mm-hmm. You can, you have real-time information. That's hugely enabling in the right hands. Mm-hmm. On the other side, I'd say two things quickly. One is that, to your point, machines don't have a heart, at least not now, and hopefully I don't, not in my lifetime. But so, people rebel when they feel like they're talking to a machine, or
yes, frankly, yes, we do.
Yeah, or even when they're talking to a programmatic, call center somewhere who's obviously reading from a script and wants to get you off the phone as fast as they can. I mean, that's not AI, but it's kind of the same thing. It's a lack of focus and concern for what people are feeling and thinking and just experiencing with your brand. So I think, to me, AI is a phenomenal enabler, but at the end of the day, the brands that really succeed are and will continue to be the ones who have humans enabling the machines as opposed to the other way around. I think that it's so critically important that we don't lose touch with the fact that machines aren't talking to machines, they're talking to people.
Yeah. So two things on that. One, that's the big reason why we launched the Gusto Now movement, because that really is about doubling down on humanity in the age of AI and using technology to extend people, not replace them. Yeah. That's the whole idea of the movement.
I completely agree with you. And from a brand perspective also, is if everybody continues down this race, which you need to do because you need to have the business tools, so you need the technology. But if all the focus is on technology, then everybody's also going to be the same.
Right. That's right.
It's going to be the same. If it's that human element,
right,
that separates. Right.
Yeah. That was the second piece I wanted to bring. That's what makes you. That's what distinguishes you. And you also said too that when you are just given technology to deal with when things go wrong with a product or service delivery, that what happens is the customer feels abandoned. And if that isn't a strong word for you, I don't know what's going to get your attention on that. Your customer feels abandoned. Wow. Yeah. What do we do when we feel abandoned? Boy, there's a lot of energy that goes into that, and you're looking fast for somebody to replace that.
Well, and 100%, and in your, in psychology, and I'm not a psychologist, but one of the things that you learn quickly is that when someone likes you and has that share of heart with you and that affinity, if you ask, they'll probably say, I really like that, you should try company X or brand X or meet so-and-so, because they're nice people, they're cool, they matter, they're important, they have meaning, all the things we've talked about. But when you get turned off, you may not yell and scream about them when you love them, but boy, do you yell and scream about them when you don't, when they disappoint
Boy,
you.
so
Yeah.
right. Yeah, big, loud voice there to many people. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
let's grab our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We are on the air with Warren Kornblum. He's the former Global Chief Marketing Officer of Toys R Us, as well as many other leading international brands. He now advises leaders and brands on how to build trust and emotional connections, as well as on what he calls share of heart. We've been talking a good bit about various ways that we can really develop brands in a way that creates that emotional stickiness we're talking about, that share of heart. After the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about really how brands have lost their stance, so that we can learn something from those mistakes. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As you know by now, this program is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you along your journey to realize more of your potential. I mentioned in my last book, The Great Revitalization, which contains those 22 best practices to equip you to provide that great, what I call workplace experience and destination workplace outcome. I gave you those 22 practices. You can actually take on my website. There's a free download of a 3-page assessment that you can take and learn to see to what extent are you meeting those kinds of demands. It's at gusto-now.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Warren Kornblum. He's the author of Notes from the Brand Stand, Thoughts on Emotional Branding from Someone Who Has Fought for Customer Attention and Won. So here I wanted to contrast a few things here, Warren. I just really appreciated how in your book you've contrasted some different brands and like where one sort of dropped the ball and another one did something right. And we've already talked about Kodak, but one thing I did want to say that really struck me about that is that you said that this wasn't a case of market failure. It was a brand paralyzed by its own success. Kodak died on a hill of hesitation. I think that is so powerful. And I know that's, it's, some of the most senior leaders, I mean, what a hard job is to know, when to act, how fast to act, which way to go. But that is such a sad story to see that they really, they were paralyzed by their own success.
Well, and I think, that happens more than it should, and probably more than a lot of people think. You're not in the stock market terms, the investment, they had the too big to fail. Well, I don't think it's too big to fail from a financial perspective, although that obviously plays into it in a completely different context. But sometimes I think brands get very arrogant. They just think, well, it's going to stay the way it is because that's always been the way it's been. And that's just not true, because at the end of the day, it's the people you're dealing with, your customers, whether it's business to business or business to consumer or direct to consumer, it almost doesn't matter. It's the people that you're trying to appeal to that have the vote. You don't have a vote. You may have a vote in a shareholder meeting or a board meeting, but that vote doesn't transcend to the amount of to the people who are dealing with you or patronizing you. So I think that arrogance, because I would almost prefer that it be arrogance than blindness, because you hope that there's talented people at the top, but that it's going to go away. It's just a trend. It's just a fad, or these competitors aren't really going to keep making a dent in our share. That's just wrong. I mean, I think the most successful brands are constantly keeping their meaning, keeping their sense of purpose, but have an ability to adjust and adapt. I was going to say reinvent, but I don't think reinvent is the right word. Right. The right word is that they adapt and they understand that, again, it's not about them, it's about the people they're trying to deal with.
For sure, for sure. Which brings me to the next example that I wanted to talk about. I remember very well when BlackBerry was it, right? The
Yeah.
BlackBerry, if you, it really conveyed so much that, if you're holding a BlackBerry, man, you must have a pretty important job or, have something important going on in your life. And I really appreciated how you were distinguishing BlackBerry and Apple. So you say, Apple didn't just introduce the phone, it launched a lifestyle. Boy, if that's not a great, perfect sentence to describe that. And you say, meanwhile, BlackBerry was slow to innovate and unify its software strategy, and it became a footnote. And so I think this is a really good, this is where you talk about the technological arrogance that can be more damaging than ignorance. But because it makes you think that you're right. And so in this case, the world proves that you're wrong. So I thought that comparison of BlackBerry and Apple was really powerful.
The interesting thing is being from Toronto originally, about where BlackBerry started was in a place called Kitchener-Waterloo, which is about 80 or 90 miles from Toronto. And BlackBerry is still there. And BlackBerry is still a phenomenally talented and gifted technology company, but it's lost almost entirely its consumer presence. So here you are talking about, we are, from a science perspective and a technology perspective, we're lights out, and governments use us because of security and all that kind of stuff. But consumers didn't care. What they wanted was they wanted something that was easy to use, that had a little bit of, some badge honor of having it, that they could fulfill their lifestyle. I mean, Apple, the iPhone, when it first came out, we can remember the evolution. I mean, Steve Jobs and followed by the people. I think Apple's is a great example in many ways, of founder transferring the knowledge, and then the organization keeping up, and hopefully this new leadership will do the same thing. But Apple became a way of life and a style of life as opposed to a technology, and BlackBerry stayed about technology. You still had people that were saying, I like the what's coming back today. I like the tactile keyboard on my BlackBerry, and iPhone doesn't have that. Well, so what? What iPhone had, it became a part of everybody's lives, as did the music it did, the FaceTiming. I mean, they've just evolved in every step of their company's history because of one thing. They have a relentless focus on the people using their products, and realize, I think, it's not just about innovation, it's about innovating for the people we're trying to make their lives better, or be a part of their lives is probably a better way to put it. And I think BlackBerry, well, obviously really smart people still are. They just, 1 and 1 didn't make 2, and it maybe made like less than 1 when it came to consumer adoption. And you're right, at the beginning, everybody had a BlackBerry, and certainly every business had them. There were businesses that didn't allow you to use anything but a BlackBerry because of their technology, but they just lost sight of their users.
Right. You talk about, Bed Bath & Beyond, it was just, drowning in deals kind of thing. I remember that too. And so that goes back to, a brand stand, as you were saying. And I loved your chapter on clarifying your message. And you say clear beats clever. And I really appreciated that. If you could speak a bit more to what we mean by clear over clever.
Well, sure. I think that people need to, I probably am almost boring on how I keep coming back to it, but it's such a fundamental belief of mine. It's about them. It's not about us.
Yeah.
And if you take that posture and believe that, and your whole thought process comes from that perspective, then really, in addition to putting together something that is appealing to them, you have to be very clear about what you stand for, and very clear of what they can expect from you, and very clear about why they should be loyal to you. If it's all about, let's go out and hire some really creative person and have them come up with a catchy line, but the organization doesn't live to it, or it's just, or in some cases, 1 and 1 makes 7, and it's not what you stand for. You can be as clever as you like, but if it doesn't translate to the people catching it and receiving it, and it's not what they experience, and the experience point is not just the website or the ad, it's physically walking the stores, it's the experience of things we've talked about before, it's customer service, it's got to be, you clearly have to stand for something, and you need to be able to communicate it, but just coming up with clever ways to say it doesn't mean you're living it. And that is so bad term, but see-throughable by the consumer that it's almost a negative. So yeah, I think, it's not to say go out and be dumb and come up with dumb campaigns or in any way to belittle the listener by not being clever, but it's saying before you can be clever, you have to be clear.
Mm-hmm. I loved what you said, Warren. You say clarity, on the other hand, as opposed to just being clever, allows your customer to understand your message immediately.
Yes.
And so cleverness might spark curiosity, but clarity builds confidence, and confidence is what drives people to act. And you also go on to say that, you're really, when you give them that confusion, it produces friction, which pushes people away. So when you're more clear, what you're doing is you're showing your customer that you respect them, you respect their time, their attention. And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, listen, I think that it's such a fundamental key to success for all brands and businesses. And, in honesty, I think it's the same thing for us in life, right? I mean, there's so many through lines to good, likable people to good, likable brands that, that have, what you're getting, what to expect, and how they value you. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's not in pithy, positioning statements or, one ad here or there. It's about how you live, breathe, act, and respect every day.
Mm. You have a wonderful chapter that's about, the reinventors, the brands that adapt and endure. And I appreciated that because you're talking about, how they've made tough decisions that they were forced to, but they didn't wait for disruption. They created it. They listen, they adapt, they protect their core while transforming the edges. And I thought that was also important, especially in these times when there's a lot of organizations that are just scared and trying to find their way. If you could just speak a little bit, we only have like maybe a minute or so for you to speak to that, if you would.
Sure. I think that it's really important, again, that customer focus. I mean, 3 of the examples I used, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, because of where I was, 2 of them come out of the toy industry, but I think they're great examples of reinvention. I mean, Barbie, lifestyle changed.
Right.
Kids don't play with dolls anymore, but they found a way to get relevant. And we're not going to get to it in a minute, but it wasn't because of the movie that was part of it, but they found a way to make themselves relevant to young ladies, and not just young ladies anymore. And I think, we talked about it a little bit briefly earlier. I mean, Crocs were these ugly things that only doctors wore. And now they've become like kind of a part of life, and they found a way to reinvent themselves both by what they do, their purpose, their meaning. Yes, and they never changed their style. They just reinvented themselves, right, to make themselves much more relevant today. And probably my favorite of them all is Lego. I mean, coming again from the toy business. I mean, Lego shouldn't exist. It just shouldn't exist if it was just a building block company, right? I mean, every kid had them, but there's no reason in today's world where everything's gone online and into digital and all that for Lego. Well, but Lego found a way to live in both worlds. They've done a magnificent job. There's more and more examples of it, but reinvention is such an important thing. You either reinvent or you die.
Right. And that's really what I wanted to finish with, is it's just so important that we recognize that. I do want to give you a chance to say, how you want to close the conversation in, say, 30 seconds or so before we go our separate ways.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think that your passion for organizational health and organizational passion and purpose is so analogous to some of the things I do. I'm more external facing, but if in the situations I deal with, if you don't have the internal alignment, the internal belief,
right,
the external doesn't matter. So I just hope that the biggest compliment I get about the book from people who are in my life is that they say, I felt like you were talking to me, as opposed to,
yes,
I never set out to write a textbook. This is not a marketing textbook.
Right.
It's about someone who loves brands for people who love brands and are just fascinated by it. So if they are, I hope they'll read it. And, I salute you for what you do. And I don't think what we do is that different. It's just a little bit of a different, maybe we walk in a different door, but we're going into the same building.
I got that from your book. And Warren, I really enjoyed reading your book. I'm so grateful to know you, to be connected with you, and get to share with my listeners around the globe. Thank you for being you and sharing your wisdom.
Well, thank you for having me.
Most welcome. Listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn more about Warren Kornblum, the work that he does advising leaders and brands on how to build trust and emotional connections, and his book, Notes from the Brand Stand. You can start by visiting him at shareofheart.com, just like we've been talking about throughout the show. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on air with Rabbi Dr. Baruch Halevi talking about the work he does in men's groups, helping them heal and come home to themselves. And in his book, The Guy in the Glass, 6 Questions to See the Man You Were Meant to Be. It was an incredibly real, raw, and powerful conversation where we started off with the incredibly tragic statistic that a man takes his life every 13 minutes. And that's the work that he's doing to be able to help men heal so that they don't actually take their own lives. Very, very powerful conversation. Next week, we'll be on the air with Jason Wild, one of the authors of Genius at Scale, How Great Leaders Drive Innovation. See you then, and let's continue leaning in and discovering how to elevate your operating system as a leader to create destination workplaces where legendary business takes place. Let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.